Welcome to Indoor Voices, presented by Millicare Floor and Textile Care. Join us as we explore the great indoors and talk to experts about how to improve our indoor environments. Indoor world, welcome to another Indoor Voices brought to you by Millicare Floor and Textile Care. Today, we've got a fun episode for you because we're bringing on the great Kevin Pearson, who is the chair of the IICRC. And he's actually been on the board for the last 10 years with the IICRC and owned his own business before getting on the board there. So you're probably wondering, I'm throwing out this acronym IICRC. So I'm going to bring Kevin in right now. And Kevin, for the person who has no idea what the IICR is, IICRC, it's a mouthful, let's start with what that stands for. And could you give us a little history?
Sure. Thanks for having me on, Brian. By the way, I appreciate it. So IICRC, because it is a mouthful, Brian, a lot of times we just refer to it as the Institute, but it's the Institute of Inspection, Cleaning, and Restoration Certification. So it's even more of a mouthful if you try to say it all out. So that's why we just say either IICRC or the Institute. If you're in Australia, you say IICRC. So, it depends on your location there. So the organization started in 1972, and it grew from there. I actually became a registrant in 1992, whenever I was a technician, and so it's hard to believe that next year I will have been 30 years being a registrant, but yeah. So and then somewhere it was around 2004, 2005, I started being on standards committees and volunteering there. And then one day, 2011, I got the call and said, "Hey, I've been elected to the board of the Clean Trust." And I was like, "The Clean Trust? I thought this was IICRC. I want to be on the board of the Institute." And so, they had changed the name at the meeting that I got elected to the board at the same time. So always in the back of my head, it was the little voice that kind of said, stupid name. So 2 years later, it was kind of a thing of mine on the board. And so I was the one that got to make the motion to change the name back to IICRC. So that was really cool for me to be able to do. And so I've been on the board now for, it's 10 years this year. So it's hard to believe, but yeah. And then somehow I guess there was no other good candidates, Brian. And they said, "Hey, you're chair." So I was like, okay, great. So, just kind of fell into it, and it's definitely something that I have thoroughly enjoyed. There's difficult times, but there's difficult times with anything you do that's worthwhile in your life, and this is no exception. But I have had a blast, during the last year and a half or so, and I still got about a half year left.
I'm going to use your verbiage there, the Institute. What is the mission statement of the Institute?
The Institute was formed for standards and certifications. Okay, so the goal of the Institute is just to do that. We don't have trade shows. We don't do a lot of things like a trade organization would do, like you would think of a trade association doing. So we just try to stick in our lane for standards and certifications. And we have ANSI approved standards, the American National Standards Institute. I have to be careful because I can throw out like a whole dictionary full of acronyms. And so, yeah, if I miss one and you don't know what it is, ask me. I might know. If not, I'll do the MUS. About MUS, made up stuff. I'll just make it up and we'll just pretend like I knew. So, but yeah, American National Standards Institute is who our standards are accredited through. And then we have certifications, and we're also right now looking at getting our at least one of our certifications, um, accredited by a third party. So ANSI has another arm called ANAB, and you're going to ask me what that acronym is, and I don't know. So, but it's through ANSI, and they do the certifications rather than the standard side. ANSI is standards, and ANAB is certification. So we have one that's going through that process right now. It's just in the beginning stages, but hopefully that will be coming down the pike later. So that's kind of our mission statement. That's what we really stick into.
I love it. I love it. And I know my organization, Millicare, definitely likes to abide by certain standards, especially as we go to work in the marketplace. But from your perspective, why do we need these certifications and standards?
No, it just raises the level of all the technicians and firms in the field doing their job. If there's standards out there, then everybody should at least be performing to the standard. If you're not performing to the standard, you're probably going to have problems on your jobs. I know years ago, whenever I got involved, that was one of the reasons why I got involved, is I wanted to know more about the standards, how they're developed, to be a part of the process, and be around people that were more successful than me. So there was several reasons I got involved, but just being able to talk about standards all the time and how it can work better in your business was a big deal for me back then.
Okay, so you're the chair, and we've talked about some certifications and standards, and we'll get back to that. But to be a little bit fun and maybe a little bit light, what does the day in the life of the chair of the IICRC look like?
People think it's all fun and games, and there's some of it that is, I'm not going to sugarcoat that part or anything, but there's some of it that is. But there's many days where it is nothing but 8-9 hours on the phone constantly with, we have 185 approved instructors. So if there's something going on that they don't like, I'm going to hear from them. And if, also in contact pretty much every day with our CEO, Michael Dakduke, different staff members as well, because we have so many things going on in the organization. It's busy. And especially if we're, let's say, 3-4 weeks out from a board meeting, or 3 or 4 weeks out from one of our certification, our standard summit, or our annual instructors meeting, stuff like that, where we're going to have a bunch of people and everything has to go right. Well, man, those days are really long. So, but it's definitely fun, and I'd like to say IICRC never sleeps too. So a year ago, before the pandemic, so right about this time last year, we were in 26 countries. Okay, we had registrants in 26 different countries. Now, a year later, we have registrants in 40 countries around the world. So whenever it seems like I'll go to sleep and my email box is cleaned out and everything, but there's people on the other side of the world in Australia up, and they're, typing away, sending emails. There's something going on 24/7. And so it's people don't really realize the scope of the organization, but it's quite large.
Okay, so I'm going to dive a little bit deeper, because I was able to kind of see a different side of Kevin Pearson when I checked out YouTube and I checked out Chats with the Chairman. So Chats with the Chairman of the IICRC. Can you tell some of the listeners what this venture is that you're in the middle of?
Yeah, so that actually started before the pandemic. I had this idea. I was a guest on a show kind of like this. And I thought to myself, hey, well, I could do that. I could have my own guest. And then I thought, okay, what's going to kind of be my angle? So the premise of the show is to highlight the volunteers of the Institute. And, people that maybe work on a standards committee forever, or they serve on the board, or they're an instructor, or they're part of a technical advisory committee, which we call TAX. So there's another acronym for you. And they may work there for years and nobody ever knows. You see a brand new exam come out, it gets updated and it's out there, but you don't know who did that behind the scenes. And so the idea was to have people on. So once a month, we do chats with the chairman, and I have different guests every month and just find out how they got involved in the Institute, why they got involved, what they currently do, maybe what they've done in the past. And we have a little fun along the way too. There's been talk of banana sandwiches on chats with the chairman. There's been people have brought on rugs. I had a guy, Lee Center, tried to sell some art on the show. It just, people try to throw me curveballs, and it's kind of my personality. I like to have fun. And so we have a little fun, and we try to learn a little bit about the Institute and the volunteers at the same time.
I think it breaks up. When you talk about certifications and standards, sometimes that can seem a little cold, but you make it very, very interesting in chats with the chairman and with your volunteers.
And it brings a personality to the Institute. Before, I think people always looked at the Institute as a big organization or whatever. It's nameless, it's faceless, but it helps put names and faces to what gets done in the Institute, so people can realize, hey, there's a lot of opportunity if you want to get involved. There's a lot of different ways you can do that.
So you talked a little bit about instructors. And so I wanted to pull out from you, what's more of that organizational structure of the IICRC?
So the Institute actually does not own any schools. They do not employ any instructors. We have approved schools and approved instructors. So we don't technically hold classes. We have the exam. Okay. And so our portion of that is the exam. But the schools go out and put on the classes. Now, they do have to have meet certain criteria within the CPD. They put out the courses on, the school does on their own website, their own instructors, and then we administer the exam. So that's kind of how it works. But most people just think IICRC put that on. And it's not the case.
Yeah, that's good to understand. So with schools and instructors, and knowing you guys send the exams, how do you control the quality, say, of that many schools and instructors?
It's a pretty rigorous process to go through to become an instructor. First off, they also have to have their manual approved that they're going to teach out of, so we know that they covered all the test questions in the manual. And so that's some of the ways that we kind of can control it. Because if you're starting today and you don't have a certification, it's going to take you 3 years to be a master. Let's say you're trying to teach carpet cleaning. Take you 3 years to be master cleaning technician. And then you have to have that to be able to apply to be an instructor. So if you're starting out from ground zero, it's going to take you at least 3 years before you can be an instructor. So there's a lot of steps along the way. And, once you kind of go through all that, you kind of take a little ownership in it, and you don't want to screw it up then. So that helps control it a lot. So it keeps the standards high. It keeps, we're going to have really good instructors out there in the marketplace too.
That's awesome. All right. So we're getting back a little bit now for this standards and processes that you guys have. Sorry, standards and certifications.
Mhm.
So what is the process of creating or revising standards within the IICRC? You guys have so many classes that I've even been a part of. And I know that you've created those and you've revised those. How do you go about doing that?
Okay, so when you're talking about revising a standard or coming up with a standard, ANSI has a process that you follow. Like it starts whenever you're putting the committee together. You have to have a balanced committee. You have to have so many end users, manufacturers. Every different user group will have to be represented, and it has to be balanced. So you can't have, uh, 10 carpet cleaners and one manufacturer. You got to balance that out. So then whenever they get that done, then they go through there, and as long as you follow ANSI's process, then, and it's a consensus, because you have to reach consensus as part of ANSI's process, then the standard can go through. So it's a pretty rigorous process. It can mean that whenever you're in debate, so to speak, or you're writing the standard, you're going to be meeting with your committee, and you may argue for an hour over whether there should be a "the" or a comma, or is this a period, or you're going to argue a lot over what seems like minute details. But, if you don't get it exactly right, it can change the meaning of the whole sentence or paragraph that you're trying to write. And so there's a lot of time in wordsmithing these documents before they go out.
I love it. So you told me that the mission statement of the IICRC is certifications and standards. And so when I ask you about how you do that, you have a certified standard and process that you do that against. I think that's totally what the IICRC is at its core. Here's what I wanted to bring out to you for our audience, Kevin. So I'm going to tell a little story, because I had this aha moment kind of before the pandemic related to IICRC. I was taking the OCT class, right? So that's the odor control technician class. And my instructor talked about going into homes and facilities to combat odors. And he talked about that there's a connection between odor control and restoration, and that sometimes it isn't easily detectable. But if you have bad odors, something may have died. A person may have died. You might have bad mold issues. And then he kind of flipped the switch and started talking about contaminants and how to use disinfectants properly. And when he went over that section, the light bulb went off that those in the restoration industry may have been very well prepared to combat emerging pathogens. So I feel like those, again, in the restoration industry were well prepared, specifically those trained by the IICRC. Do you agree? And how specifically were IICRC trained restoration companies better positioned than other businesses? I know that's a full question.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question, because, I think every one of our courses talk about cleaning in some way. If I'm going into a wet house, I still have to clean. If I'm going into clean carpet, obviously I'm cleaning. So we talk about cleaning a lot, disinfection. People that have taken our trauma and crime scene class probably were very well suited about cleaning when this pandemic hit, because that class is all about cleaning, but there's cleaning in every one of the certifications. And so you're right in thinking that our registrants and certified firms were very well suited to do this whenever it started. And whenever it started, because of that, there was some states in the US to where workers were not being considered essential. And one of the things that we did immediately was partner with RIA, the Restoration Industry Association, and NADCA, and we put out a paper that that you could take send it to the governor of your state. And we actually went and did that as well. And we got several of the states that originally we weren't considered essential workers in. We got them to say, hey, yeah, these guys are essential. They can be out there, because we needed people on the jobs. We needed them to be able to get to a building that's wet and be able to dry it. Else you're going to have a lot of problems in buildings if you're not, taking the time to upkeep, daily cleaning, or even if there's a water leak in the building. So yeah, that was pretty important whenever it came out. And but yeah, most of our certifications deal with the cleaning anyway, so everybody was pretty well equipped for that.
That's good to know. That's good to know. And it looks like you guys were able to kind of work with some of the local governing bodies in different states. Is working with the local governing body on your certifications and standards kind of an endeavor for the IICRC?
It is. It's something that we've always tried to do more. But right now, our CEO he's in the beginning stages of putting together, going through the process of getting us to put together the strategic plan for next year, right? And part of what he did was he went out and he's been contacting all 50 states, like Washington, D.C., the U.S. territories, and seeing where any of our standards or certifications are already acknowledged and accepted. And then we'll have kind of a basis for that so that we can then use that information to help us get involved in more states. If you're already in Florida and Washington, D.C. and, state of Washington, it might be a little easier to get into Louisiana or North Carolina or something like that. So that's kind of the thought, is to get our standards and certifications recognized by government agencies.
So, Kevin, in your 2020 pivot, you mentioned partnering with organizations. Are there more organizations that you hope to partner with going forward now, coming out of this pandemic?
Yeah, so we have partnered with another organization, and I'll see if I can't get it right, AIHA, the American Industrial Hygienist Association. And they came on board when we came out with a series of COVID-19 papers. And this started out as a task force just for this COVID-19. And then we have had 5 editions of that paper. And then when the freeze hit, most of the country back in February this year, then we took that same task force and said, okay, we got to make another task force for this, So when different events happen in the world now, we kind of have this task force put together where we can come out with information to benefit the registrants, certified firms, and we can come out really quickly. A lot of times our standards will take years to come out, right? Going through the process. But whenever a national disaster happens, so to speak, or a pandemic or whatever, you have to act fast. Our restoration crews that are out there, the certified firms, they're on the road going into these places, usually whenever the hurricane's still coming on land, or, the freeze still has everything shut down. I can't tell you how many guys I've talked to that said, oh yeah, we were driving through the stuff. And, so they're there, they're already there. So we have to turn this stuff around fast. And so that's been the goal of this task force that's been put together, is to come out with the information very, very quickly. And to their credit, people like Brandon Burton, who's our standards chair, and Mark Drozdoff, who's on our board, those two on the IICRC side have just made it, whenever something happens, you just call and we're getting it going. So it's been really a good thing, so we can put out information quickly, something we never had before.
Seems like you guys are trying to be very forward thinking with everything that's gone on so far. So, any other initiatives within the IICRC we haven't talked about yet?
You know, similar to what ANSI is in the US, in Australia and New Zealand, they have Standards Australia. And we have submitted our S500 and S520, which is our water damage standard and our mold standard, right? We have submitted those to Standards Australia to see if we can get those accepted down there. And that way they would be a standard that would be written with a bunch of U's and, metric system. So we got to convert it, right? And so that's going to be the challenge whenever it gets accepted, is converting it all, making sure it looks correct and all the conversions are correct. So we have a really good group of registrants and certified firms and instructors down there in Australia and New Zealand. And they actually sent in over 150 letters of support to Standards Australia on the Institute's behalf. And so we're hoping that that's going to be accepted. They haven't given us a time frame on when we'll know, but we're hoping it's soon, so that there's a lot of things you can do with that once it's accepted down there that could help open us up to different governments down there in Australia and New Zealand as well.
That's wonderful. All right. So we probably have various indoor professionals watching, probably some restoration companies, probably some cleaning companies. And so for our listeners, what new course that the IICRC is coming out with are you most excited about?
I can tell you the one that is getting a lot of attention right now is our contents processing class. That one seems like it's a lot of people have been wanting to take that. But we also have the trauma and crime scene class that we came out with not too long ago. It's been a little bit, but that one's going gangbusters. And our health and safety class. The HST, that class, I don't think people really think a lot about health and safety, which probably it should be the reverse, because we have health and safety in every one of our certifications. And now we have a whole separate class for it. It's actually a very difficult class too to pass the exam on. So, and it's open book. It's the only class that's open book, and it's difficult. I've taken it, I passed, but I'm a little bit embarrassed to say that it's an open book and I only scored a 92. So, it's difficult. So, because you have to look up different laws and this sort of thing, and you have to know where to find them. So it takes a little bit more time than, say, your average class, but that's one that I would say every technician and especially business owners need. It will help you stay out of trouble down the road if you were doing some things right. There's a lot of important things in that class.
No, I love it. And I look forward to taking more IICRC courses myself. Kevin, thank you so much for exploring the great indoors with us today.
Hey, I really enjoyed being on. Thanks for having me. I hope I was able to enlighten your audience a little bit more about IICRC and all the great things that are going on at the Institute. So again, thanks for having me on, Brian. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you, Kevin.